Conversations with the operators, founders, and leaders doing the slow, hard, beautiful work of becoming who you always knew you could be. I'm George Leith. Let's get to work. Very happy to have Dennis Yu on our inaugural edition of the Evolve Pros podcast. And for those of you joining the show for the first time, you remember we had the Conquer Local podcast. I'm sure there's lots of folks that watch that show that are now watching the new show. No one was a guest more on Conquer Local than Dennis Yu. So I was like, who are we going to have for the first guest? Might as well get my friend Dennis Yu. Happened to be here in beautiful Las Vegas at the NAB. And Dennis, thanks for giving us the time.
Amazing, George, every time. Always amazing.
I'm really looking forward to having this conversation and discussing evolution with you, because we've had the privilege of knowing each other for, well, I don't know if you call it a privilege, but I definitely call it a privilege of knowing you for the last 14 years. And I've watched your evolution over those 14 years, which has been quite remarkable, from that evening that we saw each other and met each other in New Orleans at the PubCon conference. And we've been able to do a lot of work together over the years. And, you know, we're sitting in this very transitional time for everyone, maybe even a little uncomfortable for lots of folks, where they're having to learn AI and they're having to adopt to new technology. We've had that the entire time that you and I have known each other, but not at the pace that we're dealing with right now. So before we get into that, I'd just love to get a bit of background for the audience that's maybe joining us for the first time on the Evolve Pros podcast, to just give us the TLDR on the Dennis Yu career up to this point. It's really hard to get it down to a few bullet points, but just to give people a bit of an overview of you and where you've come from and who's your mom and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm a Chinese math Olympiad. I was number 5 in the nation in math counts. I went to math competitions and flew around, found I was good at it, and that naturally translated into search engine optimization, working on really big data sets. Because back in the mid-90s, where I built AA.com for American Airlines, it's huge, huge data sets. You have like the Sabre system, the CRM system, the website, all the fares and quotes, all the information about like Advantage members, right? And being able to connect all these different systems was just a hairy integration kind of nightmare. And I learned from there how to do it for a search engine. I was one of the first people at Yahoo. A lot of the folks who are younger adults, they don't remember that. They're like Google. I'm like, no, a lot of our people that started the analytics, and we had the world's largest website, the most popular website on the planet. We had everything: news, shopping, travel, sports, finance, small biz. Google then built a portal that was like that. And in fact, the whole idea of PPC, they actually took from us. Right. A lot of people don't know that. And so sitting on top of the world's largest database on the most populous homepage on the internet gave me access to all kinds of things. So not only were we doing analytics for all the different properties, kind of like an agency, but we also had all the PPC. So I would run, no one can put me in jail for this now, but I would run ads for Yahoo Personals, which is our dating site, but then I could look at all the ads that Match.com was running. Right? So no one could beat me in PPC because I had everyone's ads, but I also had all the analytics. So I don't think anyone else in the world had the insight of being on both sides, because I could see everyone's advertiser account. And I had all the analytics on 250 million users. And we built these up into clusters where the ad sales team would sell them out at class 1, 2, and 3 inventory. But then we had programmatic that sat on top of that, and we built clusters for Ford and Verizon and Nike and other folks, because they wanted, people who were in the market for a new truck, and they just had a family, and they lived in the South, and they were Americans, and they, believed in, they had guns, whatever. Like it was just so much fun, because my advantage, my entire career has always been, do I have more and better data access? And now with all the AI, the teams that I had built, I hired these kids out of Stanford or Berkeley or whatnot. I have AI agents that are doing the same thing, except we're just integrating different systems. But the whole idea of understanding your audience and having pixels and cookies and all this way of tracking, audiences together across many channels, and being able to then build these clusters of users, which some people call like a funnel or whatever. You step these things and there's a pathway, and then being able to distribute that media and be able to track the media and track the phone calls and all that. That none of that has really changed. It's just now there's TikTok. Now there's different other intermediaries. Like back when I did this, Like we didn't know what an SSP or DSP or any of these other acronyms were.
Right.
But the pace we feel with this acceleration, from my view, has always been there's more technical things in the way, so it's more complicated. But ironically, it's actually simpler because there's less that we have to do because we're managing these platforms, these agents. We give these agents names now, which is crazy.
So as we look at this evolution, it's a really interesting backstory. I've got a couple other dentist stories that we'll tell in a few minutes that are riveting. But as we look at this in the theme of evolution, even though some of the base components are the same, there's been a massive learning curve, I'm sure, to that evolution. And it's easy to see that you're incredibly intelligent and you have that math background. But what are some of the things that you deploy on a day-to-day basis to stay on top of the pace of change? Because when I'm watching your videos on YouTube and you give very freely of your learnings online, I'm like, how is Dennis out on the front of that? So any tips for us as an audience as to how we could adopt some of your methodologies to stay on the cutting edge?
My methodology is really simple. I know the people that are making the change. And so we have dinner, we hang out. But think of it this way. Almost everyone comes in as an advertiser or as a supplier, right? Either you provide the traffic and you're selling it, or you're buying the traffic.
Yes.
And supply and demand, two-sided network. But here's the thing that people don't understand. What if you take the view of the network? What if you take Google's point of view? What if you take ChatGPT's point of view, the market maker? And I've always taken the view of the market because that's who I was. I ran the search. I was deciding who would get what traffic and what the price was. The market clearing price would be, 5 cents a click or $5 a call or whatever it was. So if you understand what the market maker, the network, is looking to do, that gives you a better view instead of like, oh, here's these tricks on how to like fool Google into ranking, or here's different ways we can pool audiences and mark it up at a higher price. Like, yeah, but then you're taking only the supply or the demand side. But if you take I never hear people talk about the network side. And so I've always approached from that point, and thus everything we see coming, like ChatGPT just launched PPC, right? You can pay like $3 a click, $5 a click. That's high or low depending on the inventory and the measurability of that. But we knew that had to happen if we take the network view. We knew that Gemini and Google's whole like AI overview was going to be incorporated in their ad inventory would be incorporated into that. The more they showed AI results, the more inventory there was, and they could control that. We knew that 5 years ago because I was with the head of search quality at Google. We were at a conference together. I don't want to say his name because I've gotten him in trouble he told me some things and that I shouldn't have told people on a podcast. But I'll just say that Google had all that AI, ChatGPT, Claude stuff years ago. They intentionally sat on it because it affected their ability to monetize. Because when they tried to serve ads inside this ChatGPT consolidated answer, they found that people wouldn't click on the ads. So it wasn't like they didn't know. Remember, like people were like, "Oh, Google's going to get destroyed by Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT," and we knew that wasn't the case. We knew that they had already tested that out. So the way I stay ahead is I hang around other engineers that are in charge. Like, it's crazy because you go to Silicon Valley or whatnot, and we'll be at like a fancy sushi place. I'm like, oh, there's my buddy Brian Acton. Like him and Jan Kuhn, they founded WhatsApp. We were Yahoo employees. They happened to make 14 billion, and I didn't. But I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, oh, Dennis, man, you've lost weight, or like it's so neat seeing that. That's how I stay in touch. And you would think like it'd be this like technological wizardry. I'm in the code and I have this like deep matrix insight. I'm Keanu Reeves, and like the green lines all of a sudden turn into a woman in the red dress. No, it's actually as simple as hanging out with George Leith, right? I mean, just like being around you, being around Leanna Ling. We were in Toronto last week. Like, I'm just absorbing. That's all I'm doing.
So a student of people, and you built a hell of a network. That's the other piece. I had an epiphany that came to me in the last couple of years as I've been transitioning from roles, and I was like, the network is the superpower. It's the dinners, it's the conferences, it's the being there. I had one of my sales trainers. He doesn't even know he was my sales trainer, but it was early in the days when I was learning how to sell, and he had this line: "Moving salesperson attracts business," and I never forgot that. We're here at the NAB, which has changed dramatically in the last 13 years. Interesting story. There never used to be other conferences during the week of the NAB because the National Association of Broadcasters global show took over the entire city of Las Vegas. Now, Vegas has gotten bigger and there's more hotels, but there's literally 5 conferences going on this week, and you never used to see that as that industry continues to consolidate.
Yeah.
And yesterday was day 2. I was in a few meetings. Again, I'm not going to talk about who I was in meetings with, but though that industry, the media industry, is going through an enormous amount of change, and there was like what was left to change, but there's still change happening, and there's a downsizing that's happening. So I'm going to use media as the example because it's an industry that both you and I have been close to. But do you see that downsizing happening everywhere as AI continues to move forward, or will there be industries that will grow from the evolution of AI?
The things that AI is not going to touch is physical AI right now. So roofers and plumbers and that kind of thing, which is why I love home services so much. But anything to do where there's some technical component, programming, digital marketing, building websites, broadcast TV, even like Carson Teagarden and I, we were at the streaming summit yesterday, and there's a bunch of old guys, and they were talking about back in the day when we had broadcast TV, and I'm thinking, you don't understand streaming at all. It was the most boring kind of thing I'd ever seen. We had to walk out. It was so bad. I'm like, you guys, do you not understand? You can stream on YouTube. You have live streamers. You have Twitch. You have all, and they're still thinking in the world of broadcast TV. I think it's simply this: where is the audience that's buying, right? If they're on Facebook, then that's where you need to be. But if you're a young adult and you're making stuff for young adults, then fine, be on TikTok and Instagram and whatnot. But if you're a young adult serving older people, executives like me, then they're not on TikTok, Carson. They're somewhere else, right? So wherever the audience, I've literally watched this progression, this slow motion car wreck. Where is the audience? So you remember back in the day, I was like the guy for Facebook ads. We taught summits for Facebook, training for Facebook, which they liked that because, we got them to sell. I wasn't on their ad sales team, but I felt like I was. I knew their number one first person ever to join their ad sales team. And we had a best-selling book on Facebook ads. We sold 800,000 copies of that in the Google Ads book. And then TikTok came in and said, hey, we're going to copy the ad system. Exactly. So anyone who's running Facebook ads could run TikTok ads.
Right.
But advertisers didn't know how to make video and didn't understand that other stuff. They thought it was this technical thing like setting up PPC, and you can hide behind this thing with ad groups and bidding strategies and single keyword ad groups and all that kind of stuff. And they were smart, and they said, you have an audience of people that trust you for how to do Facebook ads, right? We spent $1 billion on the ads for a bunch of big companies. So they said, we're copying the way you set up Facebook ads. So you literally can just copy the same ads over in the TikTok. And because that's where the traffic is growing, that's where we can literally move everything over. So TikTok paid us a lot of money to write a book on that. And we basically took the same concepts and copied it over. And some people were able to adapt to that change because they understood at the core, first principles, that Facebook was about telling stories on video, especially vertical cell phone video. Like this, we could clip up into different pieces.
Right. Which we will do, by the way.
And that's those little moments, like in a podcast, those a 30-second clip or whatnot, that can live on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube Shorts, which is crushing it, right? And other sorts of media, 5 or 6. And then those can also be turned into ads on top of that, right? So you and I know that because from a first principle standpoint, we understand that there are relationships that have trust. This is not AI generated. This is you and I actually going out to eat meat, for example, right? And you paid for the amazing Korean barbecue thing we had last week in Toronto. There's evidence of that, right? And brands who have evidence that they have taken care of their customers, when there is a TikTok or when YouTube makes a change, or like they accelerate ahead of everyone else instead of like being old people that are constantly reacting and denying that there's change and trying to hold on to the way things were done before.
Well, and it's interesting, and you're bringing up a topic that will be discussed on this show ad nauseum, and that is the line that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, which is, that's not the way we've always done it. And then when we look at the data, your revenue is down, your profit is down, the people that are involved in the organization are not having as much fun as they used to have, because defending a situation that's declining is not as much fun as building something. What is, you've had success in showing people the light and that they need to move in another direction. What are some of the methodologies, again, that you've done to do that? Because I've failed numerous times in taking some very veteran individuals to say, here's where the puck is headed. It's not that hard to do. I can do it. why do you find that some people adopt and others don't?
I think change management starts top down.
Okay.
So if you try to convince a manager or a VP or whatnot, you're going to play this political war and you don't have the power to do it, even if what you're saying is logically correct. So what you do is the CEO, you go to lunch with the CEO, or the CEO believes what you're doing, and then the CEO issues the mandate. And in any company, I've learned that no amount of logic, no amount of persuasion, no amount of reports can overcome when the CEO says
The
it.
top down.
Yeah.
So then what about when we're making a change in our personal lives?
Mhm.
Who's the CEO in our personal lives that we've got to reach through? I want to do
Well,
a segue into part of the evolution that is sitting in front of this audience, because if you put
Yeah.
Dennis Yu and George Leith 14 years ago
Yeah.
on film, you can actually probably find some film. Doesn't quite look what you're seeing here on the screen
No, we're
today.
half as big as we were.
And part of that is I find that when you're in better physical shape, you're also in better mental shape.
Yeah.
You're taking care of this machine that runs.
Yeah.
And when I've been able to move an individual into a new direction,
Yeah.
they kind of have their house in order as well before they make the move. I want to draw a correlation to that. If the individual's feeling good about themselves and how they're going, then they seem to be more open to making an evolutionary change in
Yeah.
business or
Yeah.
personal, or let's talk about that a little bit.
Have you heard of the shoe brand Asics? Like
Yes.
Asics Tiger? You know what
Yes.
Asics stands for?
I don't.
It's Latin. It's animo sane and corpore sano. It means sound mind and a sound body. So if you take care of your body, you take care of the machinery, like the other parts are, if you don't take care of your body, all these other things. Like I felt great this morning when I woke up because I got 8 hours of sleep.
Right.
And now I'm a more interesting person. Now I have full attention when you tell me something. If this is the hustle Dennis of 14 years ago, I would have been proud about how I, stayed up till 2 and I was up at 6 because I had calls with London and all that. Like I could have muscled my way through that, kind of like a worker with the shovel doing mechanical work.
Yeah.
But because we're doing thought leadership decisions, like 1 or 2 decisions per day is all that counts. So, and then if you're paying attention in a meeting and you're able to pick up some of the nuance of that detail, that makes everything. And I found that in a week, I might work super hard or whatever. I'm going to China in 3 days for 2 weeks of vacation. But 1 or 2 key decisions or realizations is all it takes to make a whole week of productivity.
Right.
If you're the higher you are up in decision making as an executive, the more important it is when that moment happens that you need to make the right decision at that point. And then the rest of the week doesn't even matter. I'll give you an example. Last week, we've been building all these agents. Everyone's talking about, oh, agents, which agents are better, OpenClaw agents or Claude agents or whatever. And then I realized, you know what? We have thousands of Zoom calls, of processes, of meetings, of us doing what we're doing. And we can run those into these AI systems that we built and build SOPs and then skill markdown files and other things which sort of train the agents on how to do the stuff that our humans have done. And we've gotten each of our people to create these skill markdown files, which are just text files with instructions, so that we have been able to spawn an army of agents across anyone who's an A player. We can get 10 times more out of that A player. We've discovered that B players, who are, companies are full of B and C players, when they spawned up skill files and we started to replicate them in the agents, we didn't want 10 more of those people, right?
Because you weren't getting the outcome that you wanted.
If this was the Dennis of 14 years ago, I would have just been like force, like work harder, like brute force my way into trying to get more work done. But the Dennis today is like, wait a minute, I can use agents as a multiplier. So across our organizations, I know, we all try to have the best quality people, but let's be real. There's always a few people that are your A players. And then these other people you sort of like tolerate. Like they're not bad enough to fire them yet, but you're like, okay, we'll not fire them, but they're not an A player.
Right.
But I've focused on the A players and I've paid them more money and given them the red carpet. We also fired a number of people, and some of those people also got let go or quit, which means we didn't fire them fast enough, actually.
Right.
And so none of this idea of multiplying the good thing, it being like super, none of this would have been possible unless I focused on my health and my mental clarity and decided, you know what? Instead of just having more meetings and trying to jam as many meetings as I could, I'm going to have fewer meetings and I'm going to make them count. And that like working less but having a couple key decisions has made all the difference for me. Like being picky about the relationships.
So I have a mentor that is advising me right now, and one of the things that he's been asking me on a regular basis to track is how many times I say no in a week.
Yeah.
And it's hard because I want to help everybody. I've now come to learn that some people don't want to be helped.
Yeah.
And if I invest that time, good friend of yours and mine, I consider him to be a mentor and lifelong friend,
Yeah.
Brendan King, the CEO of Vendasta,
Yeah.
very famously says, the one thing I can't get more of is time.
Yeah.
And so the decisions that you're making is about investing that time better, it
Yeah.
seems like. Are you saying no a lot more too?
I'm saying maybe, but it's my polite way of saying no. I have like 5 ways of saying no. One is come back to me in a couple months. And that's another way of saying, are you really serious? Two is I'll push it off to someone else. Three is I'll say, oh, you know what? I have a course and a video on how to do that. Go check that out. Or go ask the AI how to do that. Number four is I'll give them an assignment. Oh, that's a great idea, George. Tell me why you think it would work this way. Or like I give you something to do, like a speed bump. And most
Right.
people, they just blurt out an idea or they just want money. They haven't really thought through their stuff. So when you say, okay, why don't you, tell me how that makes sense in this particular way? A simple question, not asking for a 10-page dissertation. And they can't do that. And I found that anyone that can pass that gamut, it's not a big gamut, it's like a 3-inch speed bump, is likely good. Same thing for hiring, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
all these people that hit us up that want to be hired. And so we throw out a simple speed bump, which is, can you make a 1-minute video? And then they don't, or they make excuses like, we're not going to hire you.
Well, and I think that what I'm learning in any of those roles now, you're getting a project as a part of the interview process to see if you can back up the things that you're saying. Are you
Yeah.
are you deploying any of those types of
Yeah. So
exercises?
there are a lot
I
of
know the
there
one
are a
minute
lot of
video is one
people
of
that
them, but
are wanting to start agencies, or they, through us, or they want to be in our program or whatnot. And instead of like looking at their resume or getting on a 30-minute Zoom call and asking them questions like the traditional way, because we're all about, doing things better, we say very simply, okay, well, you want to be a video editor? Okay. Go find the most recent video on my YouTube and follow our video editing guidelines using Descript or whatever, and then demonstrate that you can do that as a micro project. Demonstrate that you can use Claude as a brain, which then you can have tools using tools, right? A lot of people don't, if they don't understand that, they're dead.
right,
Okay.
right.
But use Claude or Gemini to use the Descript API to then you give it tool usage, MCP, that kind of thing, and then demonstrate you can do the work. If you can do the work, then I'll hire you. But 99% of people are disqualified. Imagine you and I are running Ringling Brothers Circus, right? Dun dun da 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 dun da da. And like there's clowns that are coming before us and they want to be hired for our circus. Well, how many years have you been juggling? What kind of juggling balls do you use? And what's your experience in juggling? What circuses have you juggled for? And like that's what people do. Then I say, here's 3 balls, juggle them for me.
Right.
Right now. Show me. Right? And I that's just been refreshing because you don't have to go through all that kind of stuff and we go through all the resumes and because people can also fool you in a conversation. They can make you think that, whatever, like they can be charismatic. But I've just been back to the proof. So the funny thing is that I don't care if it's someone who meets us at a show here at NAB or someone from the Philippines or even an agent from Anthropic, they all have the same bar. And so we raised our minimum wage. We used to pay VAs like $3 an hour, $7 an hour. I said, I don't care what country you're in. Our minimum wage is $22 an hour. That's the starting point in our company. And then there's, it goes up from there.
So your social media is blowing up right now with everybody that heard about that that's interested in
Yeah.
working with the great Dennis Yu.
Yeah.
So I got to tell the story of, I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of your career. Again, Brendan and George were, as we were building Vendasta, we were in London at a conference. Dennis sees us there on our social media, and we end up in a lounge at the Hilton
Yeah.
at Paddington Station, and we had a great conversation with you and a few of your colleagues.
Yeah.
And there on the screen, because in the lounge they had CNN on,
Yeah.
is Dennis Yu at the news desk at CNN,
Yeah.
and you're discussing and debating the Cambridge Analytics,
Yeah.
Facebook, whatever it was. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was a conspiracy or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that because it's a hell of a story.
So I've been well known as the data guy that understands things like the Facebook API and how it works and how you do micro targeting. I'm well known for this dollar a day thing, right? So one of a friend of a friend is George Howell, who him and Anderson Cooper are the anchors for CNN,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because everyone knows each other. That's how the media works. Okay, it doesn't matter what the thing is. There's always a few people that know each other in any industry. And they said, like, who's the best guy when it comes to covering this data privacy issue and Cambridge Analytica manipulating stuff and the Russians interfering with the U.S. election? And oh, Dennis used the
Which
guy.
turned out to be false, by the way. I do have to throw that out there. Anyways, go ahead.
So I I got a call from George and he said, "Hey, I need you in the studio tomorrow morning in Atlanta." Right. And I was in Phoenix at the time. So I flew a red eye and I thought, oh, I might not make it in time. And if you fly a red eye, you're tired. You try to drink like 3 coffees you don't want people to see how tired you are. Right. But they had me on there in the studio and I thought I goofed it up. Because when you're in a real studio, there's like 7 or 8 cameras, there's a thing in your ear. 10 seconds before going live, the guy who's in the sound room or whatever that area is says, "Straighten Dennis's tie. It's not right." Like, oh, and I'm feeling all the pressure. I'm trying to straighten my tie, you know. And then, 3, 2, 1, and you know, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Cambridge Analytica has been in all the news about this and that, and today we have Dennis Yu, who's." And I saw on one of the monitors. I was like, "Holy crap! I'm on TV." And I was just watching myself like that. I couldn't believe it. And I was watching for 10 seconds without realizing, wait, that's how I was looking on TV. So all these people started texting me and calling me. He's like, "Dennis, are you high? Like I saw you like that on TV." Right? And you can see it. If you go look it up on YouTube, but look like a complete dunce. And he says, "And now, Dennis, what do you think about what about yeah, I think it's a bad thing. Yeah, the data targeting, I think there's lots of manipulation, And I thought I totally bombed it, right? Because, in live TV, you get 3.5 minutes, which is a long segment, right? Especially when it's a top story. But then Mark Zuckerberg would keep goofing things up. And then they would invite me back into the studio every time Mark Zuckerberg said something bad. Oh, let's bring Dennis back, right? So I went to CNN 5 times in Atlanta.
And you're debating Zuckerberg, but he's not really a part of the debate. He's just doing things in the course of business, and you get to analyze it.
Yeah, so his CMO, head of growth, is Alex Schultz. He just wrote a book. He's a good friend of mine. He called me afterwards and says, "Dennis, you can't be saying stuff like that on TV." But you were fair, and I know you don't work for us, so it's okay. But at least you're fair about all that.
Plus, at the end of the day, you did spend how much on Facebook over the years on
Well,
advertising?
they should pay me a commission. Like even 1%, that'd be $10 million,
That would have
right?
been
That
pretty
wouldn't be
nice.
too bad.
Pretty nice.
Oh, let me tell you one other thing. So I'm always sneaky about this. I'm trying to think like, how do I'm always like analyzing. So when they would ask me, like, so how did the Russians interfere? Because they spent $140,000 in this thing with Donald Trump or, whatever it was. And I said they used the dollar a day technique because they put out a bunch of ads, found out which one worked the most, then put $10, put $100. So I was actually teaching on TV using the terms that I created.
Your methodology.
Yeah. Then I took those segments and I targeted people that worked at NPR, USA Today, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, Miami Herald, all those places. And then if you look up my name and Wall Street Journal, New York Times, like you'll see my quotes. And because I micro-targeted the media. So I literally showed how Cambridge Analytica and these guys were using micro-targeting to be able to influence a very, very narrow set of people. And explaining that on TV, I even took the TV segments. I incepted the TV journalist people and ran ads so other journalists. So I got so much media coverage on the very thing that I was talking about, which I thought was hilarious because I don't think any of the people in media to this day even understand that's what I did.
One of the most interesting graphics that I saw the other day, I'm using Obsidian as a brain to feed my AI, and it has that web. And I saw it the other day, and I immediately thought about this interview because you've done a hell of a job of building a web to make sure that if the audience is there, Dennis is there.
Yeah.
And you're laser focused on the audience rather than the tactic.
Right. So we did an inventory on George Leith and all the Conquer Local podcasts and all the conference speaking and all the people that have said good things about you and your LinkedIn recommendations and all that kind of stuff, which I didn't get a chance to show you, but I'll show you later. But you have an impressive breadth of all the people that you know and deals that you've done and whatnot. And I bet you don't even know, you've never seen that before.
Well, and we're working on that project right now. Thank you for leaning in on that. That knowledge graph and that knowledge panel is what a creator which is, let's face it, what we're doing here, we're
Yeah.
all creators, is what they should be aspiring
Yeah.
to build, because now we are the media.
Yeah.
And having led media organizations and worked with media companies for a long time, I've got a couple of numbers in my head for this show to see how fast we can build a media brand from scratch with Evolved Pros and beat the traditional media brands in the online space.
Yeah.
And the numbers aren't that big, because there's always that lean back to the traditional media rather than the new media. We're going to be laser focused on just doing it on new media, and it's not going to take very long. And you see these TikTok influencers, and it's inspiring what they're doing, because they will build 8 million and 9 million with their gig, but they're learning how to manipulate the system. And I don't mean manipulate in a negative way. I mean manipulate the system to grow the audience.
It's a reward loop. So whether it's the algorithm that determines what to recommend when you're on Netflix or Amazon, or what TikTok should show you, they're all based on a reward loop, which is the algorithm. Think of it as like a person who's like a golden retriever that really wants to make you happy. And so, if you do a good trick or whatever, then you get a treat. That's how reward loop works. So the reward loops are based on a combination of engagement, time on site, clicks, ad revenue, and all the networks. I don't care if you're Spotify or YouTube, like they're all based on a different combination of weightings inside the reward loop. We can, I don't want to say manipulate, but because we understand the reward loop, which is the network view that I talked about, we can go viral.
Right.
So it's this simple. I can take any snippet of video of you, George, with someone else, and then I target all the people who know Brendan King.
The someone else, yes.
Yeah. And so what does that do with the reward loop? Relevancy super high, click-through rates high, watch time is high, right? So because we've assembled, whether it's an Obsidian or whatever, this inventory of everything about you, about Evolve Pros, about Accelerant, right?
Right.
We can find all of the angles of trust and connection that you already have, right? And you are prolific. So there's many different points that come off of that. And so because the engagement rate is high, when we boost that, when we distribute that, when we repurpose that to multiple channels, and then find those things that are connected, anyone who might be interested in George Leith and find that relevant, we're basically leveraging trust, turning that into engagement. And people, the more information there is, the more AI generated, whatever there is, the higher the filter power of, I'm going to go by who I trust, who's making the recommendation on, should I have an $11 Dunkin' Donuts coffee here?
The one thing that we saw that was really interesting with the Conquer Local podcast that ran for 5 years, and my good friend Jeff Tomlin now is shepherding that show into the future, was that episodes in year 1 and year 2 were getting as many views in year 4 and 5 as we continued to build out that audience.
Right.
And I think some people have a tendency. I will tell you, there were times where I was like, I'm going to shut this thing down after year 1 or 2, because you just don't really see the growth. And then it was in year 3 where we were at conferences and we would walk up to meet people and they're like, I listen to your show every week. Now, they probably didn't listen every week, but do you find sometimes that creators give up too early when they're building the content?
They have the idea, I'm going to create 3 or 4 shows and I'll be Mr. Beast. But like, I've started this new show called The Marketing Mechanic every Thursday, a whiteboard video, and like nothing happened the first 12 or 13 episodes, and I was going to give up, but every Thursday, it's like going to the gym. You're not going to get 6-pack abs the first day in the gym, but however long, maybe it takes 6 or 7 weeks to start to notice, right? But now that we're 35, 36 episodes in, I have 2 million views, and people come up to me at conferences, and we have new clients and we're doing deals, and people are like, I've been binge watching. Like so we're trying to sell one of our companies to Service Titan, which is an $8 billion. They're the gorilla in home services software. And the that was your thing. The chief business officer, the guy who buys all the other companies.
Right.
He reached out to me saying, hey, we need to meet. Right. So we got on a Zoom call. I'm thinking like, what does this guy want? I didn't cold call him. He reached out to me and he said, I've been binge watching your Marketing Mechanic YouTube videos. I mean, you guys, you don't know this, but I've been watching all this stuff. So he started asking me these questions. I'd love to be able to keep in touch and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, I'd love to introduce you to this company and this company and this company. Because these companies obviously make a lot of sense, because you guys are like the Microsoft Office of software for home service businesses. $8 billion company. What's 20 million for this company? What's 30 million for this company? And then I get a little piece. So he's trusting me as an advisor, and even if he sees this, I don't mind. Like, I'm explaining, because he sees this, what we're doing. and I'll get a little piece of that. So yeah, I'm making content not because I'm trying to become an influencer, but because I'm targeting exactly who I want to reach with the show as well as each episode. The algorithm's doing the work for me. Now I am spending a couple dollars, $10 a day, $20 a day, but I'm only reaching that exact 2 or 3 thousand people I want to see.
Well, and let's look at the old school way, which we still do today, but the old
Yeah.
school way, which kind of been happening this week at the NAB, where you get a suite and you interview people and you bring them in and you wine and dine them, and that's the way that you're building that trust and rapport. You're building the trust and rapport by producing amazing content and then amplifying it with a $10
Yeah.
investment. But
Yeah.
it's a new way of influencing that audience.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to a little bit more personal and back into that whole thing of the evolution of us as individuals, because I agree with you. There was a big chunk of I was raised you just outwork everybody,
Right.
and then that comes at a cost,
Right.
and the cost is maybe you now have a vice.
Mm-hmm.
My vice was bourbon. Just ask anybody that knew me back in the day. George could drink a lot of bourbon and do lots of amazing things with it. I found out afterwards that they weren't all that amazing, and have since given up the vice of bourbon. And now I'm over here going, this is amazing.
Yeah.
No hangovers. You're not worried about what you said the night before. And I don't think that it's always these sins or vices. There's other things, right, where you overworking and not getting enough
Yeah.
sleep is a vice.
Yeah.
There's probably more marriages that are dissolved because of workaholics,
Yeah.
where you're focused on the wrong things. Another thing that I'm going to get into as we go through the show and then in the book that's coming out is my addiction to chaos. Where I really, the meme of the dog and it's sitting there and there's a fire all around it and it goes, everything's fine. Like
Yeah.
I actually got off on fixing a problem and taking it right to the edge and then pulling it back. And I've talked to lots of people and like, that's me.
Yeah.
Like a lot of individuals have that.
Mm-hmm.
Yours obviously was you were grinding it out.
Well, that's what we feel like we have to do. Just because we have the, mother figure over our shoulder, like, oh, I'll get to work. I remember with my mentor, who is the CEO of American Airlines. You can imagine all the nonsense that happens in an airline. Bags delayed, flight attendants strike, fuel prices go up, planes are like all kinds of nonsense happens. And I would go up to the top floor of the office thing. He had the corner suite, this huge palatial thing. It had a bedroom and showers. Like some executives have these amazing
Yes.
pictures of presidents with him.
Yeah, been in the odd one of those. Yeah.
And so I have to walk past a phalanx of secretaries and other people, and I'd go into his corner office, and he would be there with his arms back, legs kicked up on the table, right? Just totally chilling. And I'm like, Al, what are you doing? I mean, shouldn't you be busy running an airline and all that? He's like, no, I have people for all that. The reason they hire me as the CEO is to think, and I need that open space. And he said, I learned this from him, and sometimes I would have the courage to do what he recommended. He'd say, I would just spend 2 or 3 hours a day looking out the window. Now we could oversee the DFW airport, the whole landing strip and all that. And I'd sit with him and we would just look at the planes landing and taking off and just think and just having that time. It's like the shower time. People say, oh, I have my best ideas in the shower. It's not because of the shower. It's because you have a moment to think where you're not being interrupted by meetings and all this kind of nonsense.
Right.
And
Well,
so he taught me that. And that's the most valuable time. Some people have a morning routine. Maybe they read the Bible. Maybe they go on a workout. But I found that to be so key because that's like connection time. Perry Marshall calls it, talking to like the higher power, whatever your higher power is. You get signals from this higher office. You ever, the best things you've ever done, where did they come from? They just like came into you when you went on a run or whatever, right? And then those one or two key decisions probably made everything in your career. They did in my career. Instead of just like working, just out of the guilt of like, I feel like I need to be working. Now I have no guilt. I can take a whole week off. I have no guilt because I know when that moment of inspiration hits, I need to be focused at that time and then execute that one thing through and just ignore all this other stuff.
So we're an iconic location. I find that iconic locations that I've saw in movies
Inspiration, yeah.
that they drive inspiration.
Yeah.
Table Mountain in Cape Town, South Africa.
Yeah.
I've been privileged to go. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you talk about that. I call it a foundational layer of some sort of belief that there's something more than this,
Yeah.
or that there's something that's guiding us. Not going to get into a religious discussion,
Yeah.
but to some people it is
Yeah.
a religion, but more being alone in our own thoughts. Like there's these things online right now. X is one of my channels that I spend time on, and it talks about the most dangerous individual, and not, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in a powered up kind of way, is the individual that can be alone
Yeah.
and be alone with their own thoughts and really do that inward. And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, when you know yourself, when you're the general, if when you have taken care of yourself, that exudes into every aspect of how you behave. Because if you are not healthy, if you're not, things are not right in your life and you're disorganized, everyone else can see that. And it doesn't even matter what you say. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, always preach the gospel and sometimes use words because people can see how you are.
So do you feel that as you've continued to evolve that people treat you differently or see you differently today, or is it just business as usual? Like what's the feeling that you get when you're interacting with other individuals?
More people are calling me sir. So that worries me. Like, am I that old?
That
Or
could
you
be just
just,
be our age, my friend.
yeah. Or maybe you're in the South and you call everyone sir, is what people
Yep.
say. But I learned this from Jack Ma, who I first met him 30 years ago, before he became the billionaire Alibaba guy, right? And then the Chinese disappeared him, and they probably edit that part out. But he said there's 3 stages to your career.
We better edit that out because you're going to China in 3 days. So just for our
So if
editors.
I disappear for a while, you'll know why. So the first stage, you're working as an individual to gain skills, right? All this kind of stuff. Work hard. Second stage, you're a manager and you have a team of people and maybe you manage a business. And then the third stage of your career, which I entered a few years ago, is the giving back. And it's like you live through other people and you want to see other people get rich. Like you and I have already done all the nice things, right? But so do you need a bigger house? Do you need, I mean, okay, there's a limit to like how much nicer the meal can be or how much nicer the car can be. But I love seeing other folks succeed. And so now I don't want to, like live in the past. Like back in my day, we like, no, I feel like we're the first innings just I'm just getting started, right? Even though I'm 51.
Well, and
But
Dana White's got a great line, and I'll maybe not. Well, I probably will swear, but he can't wait to get to work,
yeah,
and because it's not really work, it's a passion.
yeah,
And that's where I'm entering into my phase in my career. I did have that amazing 10 years at Vendasta where, what did we do? People are like, what do you guys do there? And I'm like, we built sales professionals. And those sales professionals have now moved to other organizations, which happens in any company.
yeah,
And to see those individuals growing in those roles and know that maybe you had a small part to play in that is what's feeding me
yeah,
on a day-to-day basis. The other thing is that I do have regret, and I'm trying to get over that. Where I look back
yeah,
and I'm like, imagine if, and I get it. It's a waste of
yeah,
time. Regret is a waste of time, but
yeah,
I also don't want to not learn from the lessons of the past, and that's part of what
yeah,
this whole show has been designed to do, and the subsequent platform and the book is if one person could read a chapter in that
yeah,
book and not maybe do some of the stupid shit that I did,
yeah,
and grow faster in the life that they want, then it would have been a success to share some of those stories.
yeah. But you are an icon in the world of revenue and sales and digital and whatnot. And it's it's okay for people like me to say that. It would be pompous of you to say that, but you've made a huge impact, and a lot of people know that.
Well, and for an icon like Dennis Yu to say that about a prairie farm boy named George that happens to be, a sales guy, I'm honored that you would say that. Maybe we should sit down and go through the laundry list of things that I've screwed up, and maybe you might not feel that way. But I do believe that there's never a wrong time to make a new start. And a few of the people that I've been inspired by over the years, it's so funny. Some of those inspirations happened 30 or 40 years ago.
Mm,
I've always been a fan of Tony Robbins, and he talks about Honda,
yeah,
and how the plant was bombed 3 times, and he still kept trying to build that iconic brand. Or Colonel Sanders, who created the KFC brand in his 50s and 60s.
yeah,
And I'm sitting here going, there's a lot left that can be done.
yeah,
People are like, well, are you getting ready to retire? I'm like, well, that probably won't work out for me or anybody that's close to me because I would drive them nuts.
yeah,
There isn't going to be no retirement. There's just going to be different passions.
yeah,
So let's talk about the future then. We've got AI coming strong. I would say that you are probably in the top 1% of adopters of that technology. Um, without maybe going too doom and gloom, like I don't think that they take over the world, but where do you think this thing's going to go in the next 36 months?
The CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, said that in 2 years, all white collar jobs will be unnecessary. Elon Musk said that in 5 or 10 years, work is something optional. Like you could grow your own vegetables if you want, but you don't have to. You don't have to work. So we're moving towards what some people call a post scarcity, postmodern society where the government's just going to give you a check every month, which I don't really like. I like
Oh, it
the idea of
scares the
earning
shit
it,
out of me.
but I've reasoned through this. People who are way smarter and wiser than me have reasoned through this, and we will unavoidably hit something called UBI,
Mm-hmm.
Universal Basic Income, where everyone gets a certain amount of money, and it will be funded by where the money's being generated, like big tech. There'll even Sam Altman wrote an essay, The UBI of Everything, where he says these companies that are like Elon Musk is worth $850 billion. He's going to have a $2 trillion IPO for SpaceX. Sam Altman did a $1.4 trillion capex commitment last year. There's a lot, like these are crazy numbers. Those companies are going to pay for UBI. And I think within 10 years, it's 2026, I think by 2036, we're going to hit something called UHI, Universal High Income, where Elon Musk says anything that you want, if you can think it, you can have it. If you can name it, because the robots, in 3 years, Peter Diamandis said this, in 3 years, robots are going to be so commonplace, like the self-driving Ubers and whatnot, that you can just have the robots take care of your kids and make the food and clean the house and do that kind of stuff. They have them in China right now for $5,000, created by Unitree, in your house. So, oh, I'm not going to trust the robot while I'm sleeping. I don't know if it's going to like malfunction and kill people and like the Terminator or whatever. Like, no, that's Hollywood. There's an 80% chance that we will move towards this incredible moment of just abundance. There's a 20% chance that something's going to happen and the world will blow up and we'll all die. But I tend to be an optimist.
20,
That there's
20 is
80%
better.
chance.
I've heard people say there's a higher chance, so 20 is not bad. Here's the thing, and why I made that bold statement of that scares the shit out of me is government's not very good at running anything.
Right.
I wonder if it isn't more of when we talk about abundance, it's like, I'd really like to buy this car, I'd really like to do this
Mm-hmm.
thing, and when that's just available to anyone that wants it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you even want it then? Like, do you want
Well,
the
how would you compare?
items,
That's the problem.
right? So if
Yeah.
if we were able to have anything, we just 3D print or
Mm-hmm.
teleport it in anything that we want,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe there isn't that demand to have the nicest of, if we could all have the nicest of everything.
Well,
Is that
it shifts
what?
from things to experiences and connections.
Right.
So I treasure our relationship
As do I.
over the years, and that's not anything I could ever pay for. And I've made sacrifices to be able, like George is over here, like we're in the same town. I'm going to move things around so I can spend time with George.
Right.
That means a lot to me.
Right.
So when money doesn't matter, think about how does your life change if money doesn't matter? And I made that decision a few years ago to act that way.
Right.
And that's what I do now. Because other people are like, well, I'm a plumber. I've been, doing plumbing for 20 years and I'm never going to stop working because I'm always going to, the robots are never going to be able to do surgery as well as I do or whatever the thing is that you do. Yes, they will. And if your entire value is tied up in you as a worker, you have a bigger issue to deal with.
Right.
Because your value should come from you as a person, your relationships, not the fact that you have a particular skill. And I had to come to terms with that because I had this low self-esteem issue where I didn't want to be around people like you because I'm like, well, I'm not worthy of hanging around George Leith. Like, I need to constantly be working or showing that I'm valuable enough and doing all these things to show that I'm worth your time.
Right.
Until I realized, no, I'm a child of God. I'm worthy, right? And I could be around Graham Stephan or whoever it might be. We're hanging out with Sean Cannell. Oh, he's a big deal. You know what? He's got to poop just like everybody else.
It puts his
Right?
pants on one leg at a time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you get to that point. Like at one point in time in my career, I owned a nightclub and we had bands come in and I got to meet some of the artists that I really admired because I was always a music person and I was in the radio business. So you kind of lean to, and then I met some of these folks and and unfortunately saw the way that they conducted themselves,
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't know if I don't really have any sort of affinity for that individual again. And I realized that they were exactly like everybody else,
Yeah.
with probably a hell of a lot more demons than I was dealing with.
Yeah.
And it got me, it helped me as a salesperson, by the way, because I'll cold call anybody. I
Yeah.
don't care what their title is or their role is or anything else. So getting to that level playing field. But I wonder, Dennis, sometimes if that isn't just the miles on the tires and the years that we've put in, where we're hopefully getting a little bit wiser as time goes on and we really understand what's important.
I think you eventually realize that no one really cares how you look or whatever it is. And if you are there for other people and you are there without worrying about comparing or how you look or sound, life is just so much easier. And it's like the serendipity. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe the right people are connected. We get to do things that we want to do. The fears that people have of what will happen, the brain doesn't understand whether that's a fear or reality. So I don't even think about it. It's not like I'm pretending bad things don't happen.
Right.
But I look at things like Carson Teagard's here in town, and
He's
I
right behind the
believe
camera today.
maybe this is an egotistical thing, but I believe that this was meant to be. And
Right.
I believe that if God or whatever people believe in, if God is doing things for you, some people like everything bad happens to them all the time. They're always complaining. There's a rain cloud. It doesn't matter. Like it's just like always bad things happen. Every time we talk to them, it's like bad, bad, bad. Like, ugh. But I believe everything happens for us.
Right.
So I look forward to these things. Every day is Christmas to me. There's all these amazing things. And so, if you open the box, take the ribbons, most people are like, it's going to be a bomb. It's going to blow up in your face. I open the gift and I think, I anticipate it's going to be amazing. And it is. Or maybe it's because I think it is, or maybe because I have a good aura or vibe that causes other people to, or like things that could look bad initially ended up being really good because we have a good outlook, whatever you want to call it. Right? I found it to be true, which is weird because like this math Chinese engineer guy is now who's like all about proof and I need to see like is now I've been able to relax that a bit and say, you know what? Let's allow good things to happen.
So it's so interesting as we've known each other over the last 14 years. You came from that data-driven
Yeah.
model. I came from more of an aspirational model, and now I'm starting to use data to make decisions. So we've kind of flip-flopped a little bit, and I'm pretty sure that that's due to your influence in my life. And this interview was really important to me to do face-to-face, the way that we're doing it right now. When I look back at the numerous interviews that we've had some of them we were side by side on the screen, but because you've been such an important part of the evolution of my career, it's really a privilege to have you on the show and to have this face-to-face time and meet Carson. And we'll probably get Carson on a show here in the future as well, but he's here in the market. And it's been great to do it here in Las Vegas, your home. Not one of my favorite places to come, but I do like coming to see you. And the NAB broadcast was what started my career when I was 16 years old. And I remember starting at the radio station and hearing about this big conference in Vegas. And then I remember when I first got to come to it, and it's interesting to see the evolution of that as well, where an industry that, who would have thought that Yellow Page industry would have went away.
Yeah.
One of the greatest products ever invented was the Yellow Pages, right? The upsell, lock the client in. If you didn't pay your phone bill, they'd shut it off. And that industry went away. It's still around in some markets, I should say, for some of my friends that are still doing it. It had to evolve, but it by and large went away, and nobody saw the competitor coming, which was Google. That came, like, who would have mapped that out? So I think that if we look at some of those other industries that have had the steamroller come through and we always look over our shoulder, I think that allows us to kind of future-proof thing because, and I don't know about you, but one thing that I'm petrified of is irrelevance.
Yeah. I feel the same way. That's why I like to hang around these other people, and I'm always like paranoid about being the old man who can't change. But I feel like I still have it. I feel like I learn as fast, my mind's as nimble as any 20-year-old.
Yeah, and I'm on the same path with that. I'm sleeping better. I remember things better.
Yeah.
Part of that was probably getting the alcohol out of the system, but the other part of it is being laser focused on the goals and learning to say no a little bit and keeping that focus. It's not about doing everything. I used to say I cut a wide swath, and now I'm over here. That's a farm analogy, by the way. You want to look up swathing, but I cut a wide swath, and I thought that was a superpower. And now I'm over here going, no, it was burnt cycles that didn't produce an outcome. And you talked about that earlier on the show. Well, I appreciate you joining. It's always a
Thank you,
pleasure, my
George.
friend, and thank you for the 14 years and all the support that you've given. And ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Yu on the first edition of the Evolve Pros podcast. My name is George Leith. I'll see you when I see you. That's the conversation for this week. If it moves something, share it with someone who needs it. I'm George Leith. I'll see you when I see you.